Vanessa always said she believed in me. She whispered it on nights when I was too exhausted to move, when I'd come home after another soul-crushing day of hustling, trying to convince a rookie athlete that I was the agent who could make them a star. She kissed me and told me she knew I was going to make it, that she was proud of how hard I worked, that my sacrifices would be worth it. And I had believed her. Through every rejection, every failed deal, every setback that made me wonder that if I was chasing a dream that would never materialize, I held on to the idea that she was my constant, my ride or die. The woman who would be there at the finish line when I finally made it. Turns out, she had an expiration date on her loyalty. It happened over dinner in a dimly lit steakhouse I could barely afford, the kind of place where you book a table a month in advance and the waiters barely acknowledge you unless you're someone important. I had taken her there to celebrate signing my first real client, a college football player expected to go pro in the next year. It wasn't a game-changing deal, not yet, but it was momentum, the kind I'd been desperately trying to build. I thought she'd be excited. I thought she'd see what I saw, a future finally starting to take shape. Instead, she sat across from me, perfectly composed, twirling the stem of her wineglass between her fingers before she finally sighed and said, "Jake, I love you, but I need more." The words landed like a punch I hadn't seen coming. I stared at her, the meaning unraveling in slow motion, like my brain refused to process it all at once. My fork was still in my hand, my steak untouched. In the background, faint jazz played through the restaurant speakers, and around us, couples laughed, engaged in easy conversation. But at our table, the air had changed. I set my fork down carefully. "What does that mean?" She exhaled, like this was exhausting for her, like I was being dense for not immediately understanding why she was done with me. "It means I can't keep waiting, Jake. I've given you years, and you're still—" She gestured at me vaguely. "Trying. Hoping things will work out. But hope isn't enough. I need stability. I need security." The steakhouse felt smaller. The walls, closer. I blinked at her, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Vanessa, I just signed my first real client. This is exactly what I've been working for." She gave me a small, tight smile, pitying. "And I'm happy for you. Really, I am. But Ryan can give me everything I want now. I don't have to wait for him to get there. He's already there." That name, Ryan. I felt like I had been punched. "Ryan Knox?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. The realization hit me all at once. The star quarterback, the face of professional football, the guy who was already pulling in multi-million-dollar sponsorship deals before he even hit his prime. I had spent weeks trying to land a meeting with his agent, trying to even get a foot in the same room. And meanwhile, my girlfriend had been sleeping with him. She had the audacity to smile like she was doing me a favor. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said, as if that somehow softened the blow. "But you have to understand, Jake. I need to think about my future. And Ryan. He can offer me that." I just sat there staring at her. The woman I had loved. The woman I had planned to build a life with. I had spent years picturing our future. And all this time, she had been picturing hers. One that no longer included me. I don't remember much after that. I must have paid for the dinner, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just walked out. Either way, the next thing I knew, I was on the street, walking fast, head down, my pulse hammering in my ears. My hands were clenched, my thoughts tangled and sharp, the world blurred around me. The glow of streetlights, the movement of cars, the murmurs of people passing by. She had left me for a name, a lifestyle, a shortcut. I wasn't enough. The thought burned, the kind of pain that sat in your ribs and made it hard to breathe. I had worked so damn hard, and it still wasn't enough. I should have seen it coming. The way she had started checking out of our conversations, the way she had stopped asking about my clients, the way she suddenly seemed unimpressed by the life we were building. She had been waiting for something better to come along. And tonight? She had finally made her choice. I barely noticed when it started raining. I barely felt the water seeping into my shirt, the chill in the air, the ache in my chest. I just kept walking, fast, turning down a side street, barely paying attention to where I was going. I needed to clear my head, needed to breathe, needed to figure out how the hell I was supposed to move on from this. That's when I heard the horn. A blaring, sharp blast that barely registered before I saw the headlights. The impact was instant. A wall of force slamming into me, metal crushing bone, pavement rising up to meet me, pain, sudden and overwhelming. The world tilted. The sky, the lights, the wet pavement. Everything spun. My body felt weightless, like I had been thrown into the air, but at the same time there was a crushing weight, a suffocating force that made it impossible to move, impossible to think. And then, darkness. No sound, no pain, just silence. I don't know how long I was gone. I don't know how long I drifted in that empty void, floating somewhere between life and death, with only the echo of Vanessa's voice repeating in my mind. I need more. Then slowly something shifted. A whisper, a sensation, something stirring at the edges of my consciousness. The darkness wasn't just empty anymore. It was alive. And deep in that silence, in that place between life and death, something changed. I didn't know it yet, but when I woke up, I wouldn't be the same. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of machines and the sterile scent of disinfectant hanging heavy in the air. My body felt like it had been dragged through hell, each limb weighed down with an exhaustion so deep it felt unnatural. My head throbbed with a dull, insistent ache, and when I tried to move, pain bloomed across my ribs, sharp and unforgiving. Blinking against the bright fluorescent lights overhead, I exhaled slowly, the last thing I remembered playing on a loop in my mind. Vanessa's face, her voice cold but certain, telling me she needed more. Telling me I wasn't enough. And then, the sound of tires screeching, the headlights, the impact. For a moment, I just lay there, trying to make sense of everything. My body felt foreign, like it had been taken apart and put back together slightly wrong. There was a strange static in my head, a hum just beneath the surface of my thoughts. Like I was standing too close to an old television set, the kind that buzzed faintly when left on too long. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and that's when I heard it. I hope he doesn't remember how bad the crash was. No way he walks out of here the same. My eyes snapped open. I turned my head toward the voice, expecting to see someone standing by my bedside, maybe a doctor, maybe a nurse. But there was no one there except for a middle-aged physician in a white coat scribbling something on a clipboard. His mouth hadn't moved, but I had heard him. Inside my head. A chill ran down my spine. I stared at him, trying to process what had just happened. Maybe I was still half dreaming, the drugs messing with my mind. But then I heard another voice. Poor guy, hit and run, and now he's got no clue what's next for him. Wonder if he's got any family to call. The nurse. She was across the room, checking the IV bag connected to my arm. But I hadn't heard her voice out loud. I had heard it inside my mind, as if it were my own thought. A slow, creeping realization settled in my chest, pressing against my ribs like something tangible. This wasn't just grogginess from the accident. This wasn't just the side effects of painkillers. Something was wrong. I closed my eyes, trying to shut it out, but the flood of noise only grew. Thoughts, unspoken words, floating through the room like radio signals I couldn't turn off. They weren't whispers. They weren't muffled. They were clear, distinct voices. Hope this guy doesn't lose it when he sees the bill. Hospitals are a business first, after all. All right, gotta finish my shift. Can't wait to get out of here. My feet are killing me. Wonder if he had a girlfriend. Maybe she'll show up crying, begging to take him back. The last one made my stomach twist. Vanessa. I clenched my jaw, forcing the thought away, but it was useless. The noise was everywhere. Every person in this hospital had an inner monologue running on a loop, and for some reason I could hear every single one of them. I wanted to scream. Instead, I focused. I had to figure this out. Was I going insane? Had the accident done something to my brain? Some kind of trauma-induced hallucination? But no, This wasn't hallucination. This was real. I opened my eyes again and forced myself to sit up, ignoring the sharp pain that flared in my ribs. The nurse noticed and hurried over, adjusting the bed slightly, her face showing polite concern. "Easy there, Mr. Carter," she said softly. "You've been through a lot. Just take it slow." Her lips said one thing, but her thoughts told me something else. "He looks better than I expected. Must be younger than I thought. Lucky bastard could have been paralyzed." I swallowed hard. I shouldn't be able to know that. But I did? And if I could hear her, then what about... I turned to the doctor, who was flipping through my charts. I focused on him, blocking out the noise from the rest of the room. His thoughts filtered in like a radio frequency tuning in. Concussion, fractured ribs, minor internal bleeding. Could have been worse. Brain scans came back normal. At least, that's what we think. Wonder if he'll mention the ringing. Some patients get that post-trauma. I stared at him, my pulse hammering. Brain scans? Normal. There was nothing normal about this. I shouldn't be hearing people's private, unspoken thoughts like they were talking directly to me. But I was. And if I could hear them, then maybe I could use it. I clenched my hands into fists, my brain moving fast, adjusting to this new reality. At first, it was overwhelming, a flood of information, too much to process at once. But the more I listened, the more I realized something. I could tell when people were lying. I could tell when they were hiding something. I could tell what they were planning before they even opened their mouths. That was power. Real power. I took a slow breath, letting the truth of it settle. I wasn't the same man who had walked into that street the night of the accident. That version of me had been blind, powerless, at the mercy of people who made decisions for him. This version of me? He had the greatest advantage in the world. I looked back at the doctor, waiting for him to finish his notes, before he could open his mouth to tell me my prognosis. I cut in smoothly. "So, how long until I can get out of here?" The doctor blinked, surprised. "Well, we'd like to keep you under observation for another 24 hours, just to be safe. But if all goes well, you should be discharged by tomorrow afternoon." His mouth said one thing. His thoughts told me another. "We actually don't need to keep him overnight. His tests are fine. But hospital policy, more nights, more money. Probably not worth arguing over, though." I exhaled slowly, nodding as if I agreed. But in my head, I was already adjusting. I knew the truth now. People said one thing, but what they were really thinking, that was the real conversation, and I was the only one who could hear it. As I leaned back into the pillows, staring at the ceiling, the realization settled deep into my bones. I had been left behind, betrayed, broken, nearly killed. But fate had given me something in return, and I wasn't going to waste it. The first few days after the hospital were a blur. The city felt louder than I remembered, the crowds heavier, the spaces tighter. Everywhere I went, I could hear them. The thoughts of strangers bleeding into my own like a radio tuned to too many frequencies at once. At first, it was unbearable. A flood of voices I couldn't turn off, private thoughts pouring into my mind whether I wanted them or not. I could hear the tired waitress wondering if her boyfriend was cheating. The businessman sitting next to me on the subway stressing about whether he was getting fired. The old man walking his dog, debating if today was the day he'd finally have that hard conversation with his son. I wasn't meant to know any of this. It was too much, too intimate, too raw. But the longer I listened, the more I started to realize something. People lied constantly, not just to others, but to themselves. They said one thing, thought another, made decisions based on emotions they never spoke aloud. And I had access to all of it. It didn't take me long to figure out that this wasn't a curse, it was an opportunity. I started small, easing into it like testing the depth of a pool before diving in. I stopped at a coffee shop one morning, standing in line behind a guy in a tailored suit, barking into his phone about an upcoming negotiation. He was an agent. I could tell just by the way he carried himself. Sharp, polished, the kind of guy who closed deals, not begged for them. I know what the kid wants. His old man keeps saying he's worried about stability, but it's just about the money. Give him a bigger signing bonus and they'll drop the long-term guarantee. I tilted my head, processing that bit of information. So, a young player with a protective father? The dad was the one holding up the deal, but only because he wanted to feel like he'd won. I stepped up, ordered my coffee, and casually turned my attention back to the man. I focused this time, tuning out the noise from everyone else. What else was he thinking? Still haven't told them about the injury concerns. If they don't ask, no need to mention it. Once the contract's signed, it's their problem. That was all I needed to hear. I pulled out my phone and started typing. This deal, whoever the kid was, whatever team he was signing to, it was about to go south. If I could get to the right people first, warn them about what this agent was hiding, I could make a move. And I did. Within days, I had traced the details back to the player, a high-profile rookie whose deal was still on the table. I made a call, dropped the right hints, let the right people know that someone was trying to bury an injury report. The deal stalled. The agent panicked. And I swooped in, offering the father exactly what he wanted, a contract built for long-term security. The signing bonus was smaller, but the guarantees, rock solid. By the end of the week, I had my first major steal. That was just the beginning. The more I listened, the better I got at reading between the lines. I started walking into meetings already knowing what the other side was thinking before they ever opened their mouths. I heard which players wanted out of their contracts before their agents did. I knew which teams were looking for a trade before the media even sniffed it out. Information was the real currency of the industry, and I had more of it than anyone else. I moved fast, scooping up contracts other agents didn't even know were slipping through their fingers. I positioned myself in the right rooms at the right times. The calls that once went ignored? Now, the same clients were calling me. I met with a struggling wide receiver whose team had been refusing to negotiate. He was frustrated, thinking they didn't believe in him. "They don't see my value," he told me, his voice bitter. But his coach? I had sat near him at a bar just the night before, and I had heard the truth. Kid's good, but he's too emotional. He wants to feel important. If he'd just chill out, we'd give him exactly what he wants. So when I met with my client again, I played the long game. "You need to stop pushing them," I told him, leaning back in my chair, exuding confidence I hadn't had just months ago. "You keep demanding a deal and you look desperate. Instead, pull back. Make them come to you." He gave me a skeptical look, but he listened. And within 2 weeks, the team offered him exactly the contract he wanted. I wasn't just negotiating deals. I was playing the entire industry. With every contract I flipped, every deal I stole, my name started spreading. People started noticing me. The small-time agent who was suddenly landing high-profile clients, the nobody who somehow always knew the right move to make before anyone else did. I wasn't invisible anymore. I started getting calls from major sports agencies, guys who once laughed at me now wanting to grab coffee, investors who wanted in, media outlets starting to pick up on my sudden rise. And Vanessa? She had no idea what was coming. I knew she had seen the news. I could feel her presence in the shadows of my success. The mutual friends who suddenly started checking in, the subtle attempts to gauge where I was if I was still bitter. But I wasn't bitter. I was thriving. I wondered if she had started to regret it yet. If she had seen my name attached to the biggest deals in the league and felt that pang of realization. That she had bet on the wrong man. Because Ryan Knox? His career wasn't looking as invincible as it had when she left me. He was aging out of his prime. The scandals were starting. Whispers of locker room drama. He had money, sure, but in this industry, money could disappear overnight. And when his world started falling apart, I'd be the one standing at the top. I smirked to myself, sipping my whiskey as I stared out over the city from my penthouse balcony, the skyline stretching infinitely in front of me. I had spent years scraping by, begging for a chance to prove myself. Now, I didn't beg, I took. The money came in waves, rolling into my accounts faster than I'd ever imagined. At first it was subtle, My first few clients signing bigger contracts, small endorsement deals turning into massive sponsorships, a few key investments paying off in ways I hadn't anticipated. But then the dam broke. My name had spread through the industry like wildfire, whispered in backrooms and late-night negotiations. I had gone from a nobody agent struggling to make a single deal to the most talked-about player in the business. Athletes who once ignored my calls, brushed me off like I was just another desperate agent looking for a shot, were now reaching out to me. My inbox flooded with messages from managers, PR teams, and players who had been on the fence about making a move but were now ready to sign. I was no longer the guy begging for opportunities. I was the guy people hoped would give them one. And it wasn't just because I had money. It wasn't even because I had success. It was because I had information. I knew which players were unhappy before their agents did. I knew which teams were looking to trade before the media caught wind. I could sit across from a general manager, listen to him talk about how he was happy with his current roster, and hear the real thoughts swirling in his head. We need to move the quarterback before his contract renewal. His injuries are getting worse. He's not what he used to be. So I made moves before anyone else did. I positioned myself in negotiations before they officially existed. I put my clients in places they didn't even know they wanted to be yet. And when the dust settled, I wasn't just climbing the ladder. I was standing at the top of it. I had built something unstoppable. A sports empire. But that wasn't the only thing that was happening. Because at the same time my rise was cementing itself into the industry, Ryan Knox's career started cracking. It started slowly. A few bad games, nothing major, nothing that screamed career decline, just enough to raise some eyebrows. Analysts started mentioning it on sports talk shows, questioning whether he was still the dominant force he once was. His team's coaching staff stopped defending him as aggressively in press conferences. Reporters hinted at locker room tension, suggesting that Ryan's attitude was wearing thin with his teammates. Then came the injuries. A twisted ankle in week 3, a pulled hamstring in week 6. By week 10, he was benched. Nothing career-ending, not yet, but enough to put a dent in his invincible image. The golden quarterback, the man who had once been untouchable, unstoppable, a name that guaranteed victories, was suddenly vulnerable. And then, the cheating scandal. It hit the news like an earthquake. Photographs, leaked texts, a messy, drawn-out affair that involved an influencer, a nightclub waitress, and a few damning screenshots that made him look like a complete idiot. Sponsors started backing away. Fans who had once worshipped him turned on him. His PR team scrambled to do damage control, issuing vague apologies, claiming misunderstandings. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. And Vanessa? She was holding on to him for dear life, pretending everything was fine. She still played her part, smiling for the cameras, posting supportive messages, acting like she wasn't standing next to a man whose career was unraveling in real time. But I knew the truth, because I could hear it. Her fear, her desperation, the thoughts she would never say out loud. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be different. He was supposed to be safe. I leaned back in my office chair, staring out at the skyline, the city stretching endlessly before me. I had spent years chasing after validation, grinding my way up from nothing, trying to prove I was worth something. And now, I didn't need to prove anything. I had become the man Vanessa once wished I was, and she was stuck watching the man she thought was her ticket to a perfect life slowly sink into the abyss. She was terrified, because for the first time she had bet on the wrong man. The cheating scandal broke the internet. There was no time for damage control, no carefully crafted statement that could erase the images and messages spreading like wildfire across every social media platform. Ryan Knox had always played the game like he was untouchable. On the field, off the field, in his personal life. He had built a brand on being the golden boy of football, the franchise leader, the household name that parents used as an example when telling their kids who to look up to. And now, he was a punchline. The leaked texts were brutal, explicit, humiliating, and impossible to explain away. The woman he had cheated with? Not just one, but 3. 2 influencers and a model who had receipts, screenshots, and no interest in keeping their mouths shut. Sponsors that had once thrown millions at him to wear their logos, smile in commercials, and hold up their products in curated Instagram posts were suddenly scrubbing his face from their campaigns. His team, once unwavering in their commitment to him, was making calls behind closed doors, trying to find a way to trade him before his market value completely tanked. And his agent? Dropped him overnight. No agent wanted to touch a player whose career was spiraling this fast. Ryan wasn't just a public relations disaster, he was a financial liability. His salary cap hit was too big, his personal brand was tarnished. And worst of all, his stats weren't worth the trouble anymore. If he had still been playing at an elite level, teams might have been willing to weather the scandal. But he wasn't. His body was slowing down, his injuries were piling up, his performances were declining. And when you're no longer playing like a star, nobody wants to deal with your baggage. And Vanessa, she was about to be left with nothing. For the past few months, she had been clinging to Ryan, desperately trying to hold on to the illusion that nothing was wrong. Even as the media tore him apart, as his sponsorships crumbled, as his teammates distanced themselves, she kept up appearances, smiling for the cameras, showing up at charity events, posting pictures of the two of them looking happy, stable, perfect. But I could hear the truth. I could hear every desperate thought in her head. I have to fix this. I can't go back to a normal life. I've worked too hard to get here. If I leave him now, everyone will say I was just with him for the money. I need a plan, a way out. And then the one that made me smile. If Jake is really this powerful now, maybe... She was thinking about me, but I wasn't thinking about her. I leaned back in my office chair, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching the city lights flicker through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. The skyline stretched infinitely, a view that once would have felt impossible for me to reach. But now, it was mine. I had built my career from the ground up. I had clawed my way out of the dirt, making deals that no one saw coming, flipping contracts before other agents even knew they were in play. I didn't rise in the industry. I dominated it. And while I had been doing that, Vanessa had been watching her world fall apart. I could hear her thoughts clearer than ever now, the anxiety, the doubt, the creeping realization that she had made the wrong choice. She had traded me in for a football star, believing she was securing herself a future. And now, that future was disintegrating. Ryan's career was crumbling right in front of her. His contracts were drying up, his endorsements were vanishing, his once loyal fans were turning against him. And soon, his money wouldn't be enough to keep up the fantasy. I had seen it before. Athletes who lived like kings in their prime, burning through millions like the supply was endless, only to wake up one day and realize that the money was gone. Ryan wasn't at that point yet, but he would be. The reckless spending, the bad investments, the lawsuits that would inevitably come from broken endorsement deals. It was only a matter of time before he became another washed-up name in the industry. And Vanessa? She wasn't built to weather a storm. She had built her life on stability, on attaching herself to someone she believed would always be on top. She didn't know how to handle loss. And now that she was finally realizing that Ryan wasn't going to be the golden ticket she thought he was, she was looking for her next move. I took another slow sip of my drink, letting the warmth spread through me, savoring the satisfaction of it all, because I knew exactly what she was thinking. She was going to try to come back to me. She was going to find a way to run into me, pretend she had been thinking about me, act like the past didn't matter. She was going to tell herself that I had always cared about her, that she still had a hold on me, that I would want to save her. But Vanessa didn't know who I had become. She had left me when I was nothing. Now, I was the most powerful sports agent in the industry. And I didn't look back. I reached for my phone, scanning through my messages, the flood of calls and offers from players, managers, and business moguls who wanted to work with me. Deals that would shape the next 5 years of professional sports. And then, I saw it. Vanessa's name. A text. "Hey, it's been a long time. Hope you're doing well." I'd let out a slow breath, staring at the screen, amusement curling at the edges of my mouth. She was finally making her move. I set my phone down without responding, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. She was too late, because I wasn't the man she left behind anymore. I was the man she could never reach again. Ryan Knox needed a miracle. His sponsors had abandoned him, his team had leaked rumors about trading him, and the media was circling like sharks, tearing into what was left of his once flawless reputation. The golden boy of football had lost his shine, and now, no one wanted to touch him, except for me. His manager had reached out first, the tone in his voice already defeated before we even set a meeting. There was no bravado anymore, no arrogance, no subtle condescension like there had been in the past when they believed they were untouchable. When Ryan had the world wrapped around his finger, and I was just another nameless agent trying to carve out a space in an industry that had no patience for small fish. Now? The tone was different. There was desperation in his voice, the unmistakable weight of knowing they had no other options. Jake, listen, we both know Ryan's going through a rough patch, but he's still got years in him. He just needs the right representation, someone with real power to fix the situation before it gets any worse. I let him talk, let him spew out his carefully rehearsed words, but I already knew the reality. Ryan didn't need me to fix this. He needed me to save him. And I wasn't in the business of saving men like him. Still, I agreed to the meeting, because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I wanted to watch as the man Vanessa left me for realized that his entire career, the life he had built, the reputation he had once been so sure would last forever, was now in my hands. The boardroom was exactly what I expected. Sleek, sterile, the kind of space built to intimidate, to remind the people sitting at the table that they were here for business, not emotion. I had been in rooms like this 100 times before, but this one was different. Because this time, I wasn't walking in as the underdog. This time, I was the man in control. Ryan was already seated when I stepped inside, his manager at his side, his posture tense but trying to appear unfazed. But I didn't need to see the tension to know it was there. I could hear it. Damn, he looks so different, confident, untouchable. I need him to fix this. But what if he doesn't want to? What if he just lets me drown? I pulled out my chair and sat down across from him, meeting his gaze head on. He masked his discomfort quickly, but not quickly enough. For the first time, Ryan Knox wasn't the man with all the power in the room. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply leaned back in my chair, exuding the kind of ease that only comes with knowing you've already won. "Let's cut the bullshit," I said, my voice calm, controlled. "We both know why we're here, so let's not waste time pretending this is a negotiation." Ryan's jaw twitched slightly, his fingers tapping against the table. A nervous tick. He wasn't used to this, wasn't used to being the one who had to ask for something instead of being the one who made the demands. I let the silence stretch just long enough before I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the contract, sliding it across the table toward him. It wasn't a great deal. Hell, it wasn't even a good deal. But it was the only deal he had left. Ryan's manager hesitated before picking it up, flipping through the pages, eyes scanning the terms. A pay cut, a lower guarantee. More control in the team's hands, less freedom for Ryan to demand trades or renegotiate before the contract was up. In every way that mattered, it was a step down from what he was used to. Ryan swallowed hard. His mind was screaming. "This is humiliating. This is a joke. This is..." But then the realization hit. This is the best I'm gonna get. His fingers tightened around the contract, and I watched as he fought against himself, struggling with the reality that his choices had led him here, that he wasn't the prize anymore, that the man sitting across from him, the man he once didn't even see as competition, now controlled his future. And then the door opened. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Vanessa. I felt her presence the moment she stepped into the room, felt her breath hitch slightly as she took in the scene before her, as she realized where she was, who she was looking at. I could hear everything. "Oh my God, Jake, he looks..." "No, stop it. Focus. He'll be happy to see me. He has to be, right?" I didn't react. I didn't even glance in her direction. Because Vanessa had walked into this room expecting a warm reunion. She had told herself that we would catch up, that she would flash a soft smile and I would feel something, anything for her again. She thought maybe there was a version of this meeting where we laughed about the past, where she made a few careful, calculated words about regretting how things ended between us, where she planted the seed for an easy way back into my life. But she had miscalculated, because I wasn't the same man she left behind, and I wasn't thinking about her at all. I let the silence stretch, the weight of the moment pressing down on all of us. Then, slowly, deliberately, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table as I looked Ryan Knox dead in the eyes. "You can sign it," I said, my voice smooth, businesslike. "Or you can walk. But if you walk, know that this industry is done with you. No one else is coming to save you. No one else is going to give you another shot. This is it." His fingers twitched against the table. His pulse pounded. I didn't have to read his thoughts to know what was going to happen next. Because men like Ryan, they always sign. He exhaled slowly, then reached for the pen. Vanessa was still standing there, still expecting me to acknowledge her. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, as Ryan's pen touched the paper, I pushed my chair back and stood, smoothing out the sleeves of my tailored jacket before turning toward the door. I didn't say a word to Vanessa. I didn't give her a glance, a nod, a single shred of the attention she so clearly craved. Because for the first time in my life, she wasn't even worth it. And as I walked out of that boardroom, leaving them both to sit with the consequences of their choices, I knew that this wasn't just a victory. This was the moment I made sure they'd never forget what they lost. The meeting was over. The contract was signed. Ryan Knox had just shackled himself to the only deal left in his crumbling career, a deal that I controlled. His signature on that paper wasn't just another business transaction. It was an admission that his reign was over, that the tables had turned, and that the man he had once dismissed was now the one calling the shots. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, vindication, maybe even some lingering bitterness. But all I felt was calm, because I had won. I walked out of the boardroom, my steps measured, my focus already shifting to the next deal, the next opportunity, the next move. The air outside was sharp with the scent of expensive cologne and fresh ink drying on multi-million-dollar contracts. I adjusted my cuffs, breathing in the weight of power, of control, of knowing that I'd played the game better than anyone else. And then, I heard her. "Jake, wait!" Her voice was softer than I remembered. Not the confident, dismissive tone she had once used when she told me she needed more. There was hesitation now, uncertainty, a quiet kind of desperation she was trying to hide. I turned slowly, my expression unreadable, letting my gaze settle on Vanessa. She looked the same, but different. Still beautiful, still poised, still the woman who once walked out of my life like she was doing me a favor. But the confidence that had always laced her posture, the certainty that she had traded up when she left me for Ryan Knox, gone. She swallowed, hesitating before speaking again. "Can we just talk? Catch up?" Her words were carefully chosen, rehearsed even. She had probably been thinking about this moment since the second she saw me walk into that meeting, trying to piece together the perfect thing to say, the right blend of nostalgia and regret, the angle that would make me open the door she had slammed shut years ago. I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to squirm. Then, with a slow breath, I answered, my voice smooth, calculated. "You needed more." I tilted my head slightly, watching her reaction. "And you got it." Her breath hitched, her pupils dilating just slightly, a tell I had learned to recognize in negotiation rooms. A sign of panic. "Jake, I didn't know you would." I cut her off, my smirk barely visible, but there. "You didn't know I'd become the most powerful agent in the industry?" I let the words sink in, watching as the realization hit her, as the full weight of everything she had given up finally settled in her bones. Neither did Ryan, but here we are. Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to argue, to find a way to rewrite history in real time. Maybe she wanted to tell me that she had never really stopped believing in me, that she had always known I would make it, that she just got scared, that she was young, that she made a mistake. But I could hear her real thoughts. Please give me another chance. I'll do anything. I can't lose this life. She would never say it. Not out loud, not in the way that mattered. But I didn't need her to. I had been in enough rooms with enough desperate men trying to salvage a losing position to know when someone was grasping at straws. She wasn't here to reconnect. She was here because she was losing. Ryan was no longer the meal ticket she thought he would be. His name had lost its weight. His career was spiraling, and she was watching the walls close in on her. She needed a way out. And for the first time since she left me, she realized I was above her. She thought this was still a game she could play, that she could soften her voice, tilt her head just right, say the words that would make me see her differently. But this wasn't the same old script. I wasn't the same man she left behind. I stepped closer, closing the space between us just enough for her breath to hitch again, just enough for her to think, for one fleeting second, that maybe, just maybe, there was still a door open. I held her gaze, let the silence stretch between us, let her drown in the weight of her own regrets. Then I gave her one last glance, just enough to make her think there was hope. And then I turned and walked away. No goodbye, no parting words, no second chances, because she had made her choice, and I had already moved past her.